A Life in the City, Evelyn Moore's story. Evelyn Moore was a young woman making her way in the bustling heart of 1960s New York City. The city, with its towering skyscrapers and ceaseless energy, was a place of dreams and opportunities, but also of challenges and anonymity. At 28 years old, she was a familiar face at the corner diner on Amsterdam Avenue, her days filled with the rhythm of pouring coffee and taking orders. The diner was a microcosm of the city itself, a place where stories intersected over cups of steaming coffee and plates of hearty meals. Her co-workers knew her as a quiet but friendly presence, someone who went about her work diligently. She was the kind of person who remembered regulars' orders and greeted everyone with a warm, albeit reserved, smile. Evelyn was a private person, her life outside the diner a bit of a mystery to those around her. She rarely spoke of her past or her personal life, leaving her colleagues to wonder about the woman behind the apron. She lived alone in a small apartment on West 83rd Street, a typical brownstone building on a street lined with similar structures. Her apartment was modest, filled with second-hand furniture and a few personal mementos that hinted at a life lived quietly. Little is known about Evelyn's past, about where she came from or what dreams she held close. Did she once aspire to be an artist, a writer, or perhaps something else entirely? These questions lingered in the air, unanswered. Did she have family nearby, friends from childhood? The absence of these details created a sense of intrigue around her, making her both a familiar and enigmatic figure in her community. These details, the threads that weave together a life's tapestry, remain frustratingly out of reach. Her neighbors and co-workers could only speculate, filling in the gaps with their own imaginations. What we do know is that she was a part of the fabric of her neighborhood, her presence woven into the daily routines of those she encountered. She was a constant in a city that was always changing, a familiar face in a sea of strangers. She was a daughter, perhaps a sister, maybe a friend to someone beyond the walls of the diner. Her connections, though not widely known, were undoubtedly there, hidden beneath the surface of her quiet demeanor. Evelyn's story, like so many others in a city of millions, could have easily faded into anonymity. The city was a place where countless lives intersected and diverged, each with its own unique narrative. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. Evelyn's life, seemingly ordinary, would soon take a turn that no one could have predicted. Her life, seemingly ordinary, would become forever entangled with the extraordinary, the unsettling, and the unknown. The events that followed would cast a long shadow over her story, transforming it into something far more complex and haunting. The story of Evelyn Moore, the quiet waitress from the corner diner, would transform into a haunting question mark in the annals of New York City's unsolved mysteries. Her name, once just another in the city's vast roster, would become synonymous with a mystery that still lingers, unanswered and unresolved. As the city continued to move forward, Evelyn's story remained a poignant reminder of the countless untold stories that lie beneath the surface of everyday life. Her legacy, though shrouded in mystery, serves as a testament to the enduring human spirit and the enigmatic nature of fate. November 16th, 1967, an ordinary evening. The evening of November 16th, 1967 seemed like any other in the city that never sleeps. The streets were bustling with life, the neon lights casting a vibrant glow on the faces of the passers-by. The city was a symphony of sounds, from the honking of taxis to the distant hum of conversations blending into the night. The air was crisp with the approaching chill of winter, the streets alive with the sounds of traffic and the murmur of countless conversations. People hurried along, wrapped in coats and scarves, their breath visible in the cold air. The city was a living, breathing entity, each person a part of its endless rhythm. Inside the warmth of the diner, Evelyn worked her usual shift. The diner was a haven from the cold, a place where the aroma of coffee and freshly cooked food mingled with the chatter of customers. She poured coffee for tired commuters, took orders for steaming plates of food, and exchanged pleasantries with regulars. The clinking of cutlery and the hum of conversation created a comforting backdrop to her routine. Did anything seem amiss that night? Did a shadow flicker across Evelyn's face, a hint of unease in her demeanor? Perhaps there was a moment when her smile faltered or her eyes darted nervously around the room. Or did she move through her shift with her usual quiet efficiency, her mind occupied by the mundane details of her work, the orders to be taken, the coffee to be refilled, the customers to be served. These questions, like so many others in her case, remain unanswered. The diner, once filled with life, now stands as a silent witness to the events of that night. What we do know is that Evelyn finished her shift as usual, clocking out and stepping back into the anonymity of the city streets. The night was still young, the city still alive with activity. She likely walked home, her route taking her past familiar brownstones and shops with their lights casting a warm glow on the sidewalk. The familiar sights and sounds of her neighborhood would have been a comfort, a reminder of the routine she knew so well. Did she stop to admire a window display? Did she encounter a neighbor exchanging a quick greeting? Perhaps she paused to look at the latest fashions or to chat briefly with someone she knew. We can only speculate about the seemingly ordinary events that filled Evelyn's final hours. Each step she took, each interaction she had, now shrouded in mystery. The details of that Thursday evening, so mundane for most, would soon take on a chilling significance. The ordinary had become extraordinary, the routine now a subject of intense scrutiny. For Evelyn Moore, the walk home that night was a journey towards the unknown, a path leading to a darkness she could not have anticipated. The city, once a familiar friend, had become a place of shadows and uncertainty. Her steps, once confident, now seemed to lead her into the heart of an unfolding mystery. Silence falls. The discovery on West 83rd Street. The discovery of Evelyn Moore's body sent shockwaves through her quiet block on West 83rd Street. The neighborhood, known for its serene and uneventful atmosphere, was suddenly thrust into a state of disbelief and fear. Neighbors who had known Evelyn for years were left in a state of shock, unable to comprehend the tragedy that had unfolded in their midst. It was her landlord, Mr. Jones, who made the grim find on the morning of November 17th. Mr. Jones, a man in his late 50s with a kind demeanor, had always been diligent about his responsibilities. He had known Evelyn since she first moved into the building, and they had developed a friendly rapport over the years. He had been making his usual rounds, collecting rent checks from the building's tenants. It was a routine he had followed for decades, a task that had become second nature to him. As he moved from door to door, exchanging pleasantries with the tenants, he had no inkling of the horror that awaited him. When Evelyn didn't answer his knock, he assumed she was working a double shift at the diner. Evelyn was known for her strong work ethic, often taking on extra shifts to make ends meet. It wasn't unusual for her to be out at odd hours, and Mr. Jones had grown accustomed to her unpredictable schedule. But something about the silence from her apartment bothered him. It was an eerie, unsettling quiet that seemed to hang in the air, making the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. He tried the doorknob, half expecting it to be locked. His heart pounded in his chest as he turned the knob, the sound of his own breathing loud in his ears. The door, however, was not locked. To his surprise, it turned easily in his hand. The door creaked open, revealing the dimly lit space beyond. The apartment, usually filled with the warmth of Evelyn's presence, now felt cold and unwelcoming. The door swung open, revealing the dimly lit space beyond. Shadows danced on the walls, and the faint smell of something metallic lingered in the air. Mr. Jones hesitated for a moment, his instinct screaming at him to turn back, but he pressed on. The first thing Mr. Jones noticed was the disarray. The usually tidy apartment was in complete chaos. Books were scattered across the floor, and the curtains hung askew, as if someone had yanked them in a fit of rage. Evelyn was usually meticulous about her apartment, but now furniture was askew. A lamp lay overturned on the floor, and a drawer hung open from her small writing desk. Papers spilled out of the drawer, fluttering slightly in the draught from the open door. A sense of dread crept over him as he stepped further into the apartment. Each step felt heavy, as if he were wading through thick mud. The silence was oppressive, pressing down on him from all sides. He called out Evelyn's name, his voice tight with a growing sense of alarm. The sound echoed through the empty apartment, bouncing off the walls and returning to him in a distorted, ghostly whisper. There was no answer, only an unsettling silence that seemed to amplify the growing chaos in his mind. The quiet was deafening, a stark contrast to the usual hum of life that filled the building. And then he saw her. His breath caught in his throat as his eyes landed on the still form on the floor. Evelyn lay on the floor, partially concealed by the shadow of her overturned armchair. Her body was twisted in an unnatural position, as if she had fallen and been unable to get up. Her body was still, her eyes closed, her skin an unnatural shade of pale. The sight was both heartbreaking and terrifying, a stark reminder of the fragility of life. Mr. Jones rushed to her side, his heart pounding in his chest. He dropped to his knees beside her, his hands trembling as he reached out to touch her. He reached for her hand, hoping against hope for a flicker of life, a sign that this was all a terrible mistake. His fingers closed around hers, the coldness of her skin sending a shiver down his spine, but Evelyn's hand was cold, her touch lifeless. The reality of the situation hit him like a freight train, leaving him gasping for breath. Panic surged through him as the horrifying reality set in. Evelyn Moore was dead. The weight of the discovery pressed down on him, and he knew that nothing would ever be the same on West 83rd Street. The early investigation, searching for clues. The arrival of the police transformed West 83rd Street from a quiet residential block into a scene of frantic activity. Uniformed officers cordoned off the area around Evelyn's building, their faces grim as they kept curious onlookers at bay. Detectives, their expressions hardened by years of dealing with the city's dark underbelly, moved with a practiced efficiency. Inside Evelyn's apartment, the air hung heavy with the weight of tragedy and the sterile scent of disinfectant. Every surface, every object was now a potential clue, a silent witness to the violence that had unfolded within those walls. The detectives worked meticulously, their movements measured and deliberate as they photographed the scene, dusted for fingerprints and collected evidence. The medical examiner, a man accustomed to the harsh realities of death, examined Evelyn's body with a practiced eye. His initial assessment sent a chill through the room. Evelyn Moore had been strangled, her life extinguished by the cruel pressure of another person's hands. There were signs of a struggle, defensive wounds on her arms and hands, suggesting that she had fought desperately for her life. The investigation was now a homicide inquiry, a race against time to piece together the events that led to Evelyn's murder. Who would want to harm this quiet, unassuming waitress? What secrets were hidden behind the walls of her apartment, secrets that someone was willing to kill for?